Now, how do you get through to people who see, as you mentioned, bloody Greens, the Greens who they think they want to tax the middle class and the wealthy, they want to make us all vegans, and they want to destroy farming as we know it. How do you actually explain to people that that's not your agenda, or is it your agenda?
No. And first of all, no agenda. I'm criticised for that sometimes. I don't have enough agenda. I just sort of say, well, what do you want to talk about? But at the same time, I've never met that person, and I'd like to, who has all of those issues. So they have one of them maybe, or they have one area which they're a bit oh, that's what I think about you.
Yeah.
To have them all is quite unusual. Normally there's a middle ground that I'll meet people on because I'm just there to listen. First of all, I mean, I have an empathetic approach to most of my conversations. I want to hear them out. Hear them out. Tell me how it is, what do you think? If it just says, oh, bloody green, well, that's not really a conversation.
No.
But if someone wants to stop and say, well, look, I'm worried that this will happen, we can walk through that together. Sometimes you go, yeah, that is going to be an impact on some part of your life. But I think that's not a bad thing. The key is that it's highlighted early enough and people are given the resources to adapt. So climate is one of those issues. If we don't adapt to that, we tell our children, like, time doesn't wait for you. If you sit on the floor, the soil will grow over you and life will carry on. You need to be able to keep moving, and I think that's the same as people do need to adapt, and we need to offer support for that. And that adaptation does have to come from government support, which has to come from tax regulation and from innovation being funded. And so we sort of have to invest early, and that does have to come from taxpayers, but we need to make sure it's coming from the right taxpayers for the right reasons. And I think that's why we're not just a party about the environment, because if you just say, let's take care of the environment, you turn around to a middle class who can't afford to send their children to daycare, they can't afford to get back into the workforce, they can't get the health requirements they need, or they're worried about paying the rent. You can't then ask them to come out on the weekend and plant trees. Yeah. They need to have a side job. They're driving around delivering food from McDonald's, on a Saturday and Sunday. And so that's what I learned in business. You can't say, turn up to work and work hard, please, and then send them home with less money they can live on. It just falls over.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the same when I engage with people, is I want to hear, let's actually solve your issue. I'm not just want to hear it out and say, well, at least you listen to me. So I think that's how, I wouldn't say deal with it, but that's what I enjoy doing, is listening to someone's issue and going, yeah, how do we nut this out? How do we figure this out for you individually? And there are policies in place and there's support systems in place, but they could get better. Yeah. They could be more automatic. And I think that's what we need.
Now, the Green Party, some might say, is developing a reputation of imploding spectacularly sometimes. We had the recent example of Elizabeth Kerry and that whole thing. And we also had, a while back, James Shaw effectively being told that there's no confidence in him having to reapply for his job. Do you think that harms the party, this sort of public all your dirty laundry being hung out publicly, or do you think it's what makes the party healthy? Politics
is public. Yeah. It should be. I think the last thing anyone wanted to hear is that a whole lot of changes happen inside, say, a party you're a member of that you didn't hear about.
Yeah.
And so what I'm confident is that the charter and the way that we run the party, and what I've seen change with the party over the last 3 years as we've updated all our policies and internal procedures, is they are working. It doesn't mean the people in them won't be offended and upset with the outcomes, or there'll be, say, intermediary issues that have to be resolved. But, as we see here today, they've all been resolved. And I mean, to that point, no one's ever 100% happy. The point is that we can move on as a party.
Yeah.
And so, we have a really confident caucus now. We have a group that really feels like they can move forward into the next election. And it's been a challenging 3 years. It's the second term in government. I mean, it's going to take a while to get, say, up to the level of the major parties, but it's dealt with at a flax roots level. Everyone has a voice within that conversation, and they're able to attend meetings and view online, however they need access, to see what's going on within the party.
Yeah.
And that's what's more important. The dirty laundry is dirty regardless. The idea is if you don't wash it, it stays there.
Because I've heard, it must be exhausting, because I've heard sometimes it's a very collective approach all the time, and sometimes you have 200 people on a
On a Zoom, yeah.
On a Zoom. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you get things done?
They get done. That's the amazing thing. I mean, this is something that we've taken from a lot of their Te Ao Māori principles that have been enshrined now. Like it or not, it actually works really well. Sometimes, there's an issue to solve on a marae. Everyone just hunkers down.
Yeah.
Let's resolve it. The idea of saying, well, let's bring 4 of you in, you can represent the 200 people, and you just chat with 50 people each and come up with an idea. That sounds efficient, but it actually then ends up down the road being looked at again going, no, we weren't asked. We didn't talk. You didn't come and see us. If the opportunity is there for the whole party, that it's bigger than just the MPs you see. The members of the party are the ones that are really critical. That's what drives the party. That's the people who give their time to actually drive these things forward, and they're passionate about seeing these larger kōrero within the party because the result is a good result. And I've sat on many of those calls in the last 3 years, and what I see is a process that is more like you would want to see in a family, less like you want to see in a corporation.
Yeah.
And that means that actually, yes, it's messy, but you'll see effective MPs that come through and effective change that comes through in our party. And I believe that our members, no one's ever 100% happy, with the process, but to me, that's not a result. That just means someone was left really unhappy.
Yeah.
And so as we work through these things, everyone sees the party they're backing. So if people still want to support a party that does move for effective change on issues, but also is not hidden away within the way they manage the party politics themselves, then we're still a great party to back, and I'm confident in that.
So now you mentioned about being out of cabinet, but out of the government, but having ministers. So were they effective at all, James Shaw and Marama, and what benefits have come out of being in the coalition?
Yeah, look, still effective, but could have been so much more effective.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the issue that I'm sure the public understands, but many may not align so much, is that even when you have a minister, say, for example, with James Shaw's position in the current government, it is able to table, it is able to highlight, it is able to be a voice around the table, but it does not have the effective energy that it had in the first 3 years, in the first term. So we can still highlight the issues, and that we believe was still better than being completely outside government.
Yeah.
That was the options that were on the table for us. We simply didn't have the vote. We need a little more party vote to be able to do that, and that's why we're pushing for that this time. But we're more effective in government, and that's not for those who won't vote for Green, but those who may vote for Green. We're more effective when we're actually inside properly.
Yeah.
And that will allow us to do more of the things that we're proposing. And also, anything we're proposing, let's remember, we don't change government. Government changes government.
Yeah.
So we become a voice within the room, an effective voice. You'll never see one of our policies, nor will you see any party's policy just run out. Our system of democracy is awesome. It will work through its steps.
Yeah.
But someone's got to put out the big innovative ideas and have them chopped and changed and sculpted, and we need more parties doing that. And I mean, that's what the Greens are there to do, is to actually look at that social and environmental area and say, here's a big idea. Everyone, go to town on it. Give us your feedback.
Do you think the wealth tax was a good idea, and how do you think it was received?
Yeah, I think it was received poorly. It's always received poorly, and no one ever wants to think they have to give up something that they weren't planning to.
Yeah.
I think donations are wonderful, and we live in a society where it's supposed to trickle down, but it's trickling less and less. Clearly, statistically, I think we're at about 80-90% own the majority of the assets and the wealth in the country. 7% own the majority of the assets and the wealth in the country. So that's no middle. And when I look at people now and ourselves, everyone, we're paying mortgages, we have children going to school, we have all the same costs, they're increasing. We do need to see some other places that can be supporting those costs in times of need. And that's been shown through COVID and now through our current, I think we've just fallen into a technical recession. Yeah. But it is a real recession based on coming out of these floods. There's more costs for people. Yeah, so I just think it's really an area that we do need to do more on.
Yeah. Now, people, obviously the election, it's almost too close to call now. Some people are saying a national act could get it, and then others are saying that Labour, Greens, with the help of Te Pāti Māori, it has been called the Coalition of Chaos.
Quite a cool name, though.
But, I mean, it does... I mean, we chatted to Peter Dunn, the political commentator, and he says if they get in, we could be having another election in 18 months. Do you think that is a worry that Te Pāti Māori might bring sort of a a bit of instability to it because they have some very firm views and aren't afraid to sort of speak them.
I suppose that concern is probably more around a majority Labour government. The Green Party works very effectively with Te Pāti Māori. We align more with more of those core values and principles than any other party. We allow possibly to be that conduit.
Yeah.
It's quite important to have someone in between.
Yeah.
And I think that's another place that the Green Party can be seen to be quite effective. Look, chaos to me is something that I've only ever lived and worked in, because if it's all ironed out and straightened out, well, nothing's changing. And this is not a time when nothing can be changing. We actually need to have multiple things happening all the time within government for us to reach a new resolution. We can't just tackle, let's say, one issue at a time, and every 6 months we'll bring up one more large issue we tabled. And there's actually a multitude of disasters and crises that are going on at the same time. So it will be chaotic, but the parties that are involved in that government, I'm confident, will not be chaos. They'll have far too much to get on with and are far too passionate to consider the idea of breaking apart a government in 18 months. But hey, I'm not the expert.